introduce Barry to continue the national security we're talking about. The Pennsylvania Conservative Energy Forum, we are bipartisan. We do work with Republicans, we work with Democrats. We spend most of our time with Republicans because we want Republicans to be able to message intelligently. No, you're not intelligent, you are. But we're creating messaging that resonates with conservative and Republican voters. And so we were actually in a senator's office not far from here, Senator Mensch, this past summer. And he said, you know, John, I agree with your conceptually, theoretically on clean and renewable, but as a Republican, I don't know how to talk about it very well. And so as a result, we took him really seriously, and we have begun to write a series of white papers, the first of which is a one-page synthesis of a 14-page document. We said to Ed Johnson, I said, this is great, but people aren't going to read it. It's too long, it's too technical. And so we synthesized it into a one-page document, and that's what we're in the process of doing. We're going to do it in the area of wind and other forms of cleaner renewables. National security is the next one we're doing. On April 11th, we were at Fort Indiantown Gap, just north of Harrisburg, and did a legislative event there. People told us we will never get that many legislators on an off day in one place. We ended up with a waiting list because we offered them a Black Hawk helicopter ride around the base. So we actually have a part 2 in store for that. But Fort Indiantown Gap, by 1930, there's a federal and a Commonwealth mandate that military bases are energy independent. And that means even waste neutral. They aren't going to be allowed to carry waste off the base. They've got to take care of it on the base. And the Gap and other military bases are giving serious attention to that. And as a result, Fort Indiantown Gap has installed a 20-acre solar field that provides 18% of the base's energy. They've also transitioned from coal to natural gas in their buildings and doing other things to come off the grid. And it's for national security reasons. The belief is that our energy grid is susceptible, particularly through cyber means today. And if there's an attack on the grid, our bases, our military needs to maintain their ability to be operational. And so as Republicans, we believe, and Democrats do too, in national security. So when we talk about energy, a lot of our talking points are about national security.
And another dimension of that, I don't want to distract you from your theme, but you all saw this terrible tragedy down in Sri Lanka. Well, that came directly out of a Wahhabist school that was established with Saudi Arabian money, and it's one of 800 schools that our oil money that we spend buying their oil have built, because the Wahhabist states, and it's not just Saudi, give about 20% of their oil revenue to the Wahhabist clerical establishment, and they preach jihad. That's an entire phenomenon that we're witnessing of all of this this Salafist fundamentalist jihadism. This terrorism comes straight out of the oil dollars that we spend over there, and that is one of the most. By defunding that to the extent we can, and of course we can't totally, but by creating less of a demand and concentrating more on our own alternative power and nuclear power and our fracking gas, and that we quite apart from the reality of the vulnerabilities we have, which you rightly and well point out, we are funding the war on terrorism. It's just outrageous that I get like the crazy uncle in the attic if I start.
And there's so much more to tell. One of our people we work with is a retired Marine General, Richard Zillmer. and he was in charge of the Mideast wars that took place last decade, and he said the majority of the fatalities and injuries were related to the convoy, the energy convoys that were moving through the deserts. And he's a big conservative who is a proponent for clean and renewable energy as well. We're going to move on. We're going to take a class trip. I'm a former teacher, so I love class trips. We're going to take a class trip out to the solar field that's been developed here on the Lehman Farm. And Barry Moore is the founder and chief executive of Moore Energy, based here in Pennsylvania. He, by the way, is sponsoring our event today, so thank him for lunch. But Barry, before we go out there, tell us a little bit about what you've done here and the other work you're doing in the
Sure, thank you. Yeah. Very tough act to follow. But just my background, basically, I was a finance banking type individual for 30 years. And then about 10, 12 years ago, I got involved in solar. I've been a lifetime environmentalist. And I really saw solar as an alternative source of energy for this country, things like that. And I started my own company, literally in my garage, and probably broke a couple zoning laws in doing so. But built a nice business here and doing solar. And to be honest, it's the most, I'm very passionate because I'm very environmentalist focused, but it's such a wonderful business to be into when you're going to people like John Lehman and some other farmers around here and other people, and you can create energy independence. And you can explain the economics, the paybacks and things like that, which prices have come down significantly. But it's such a great feeling for people who feel that they're creating their own power and control their destiny by doing solar. And we do solar for all types of people, whether it be homes or businesses. We're actually getting involved in transit now for train stations where they want to have remote solar stations set up around the train tracks, because in the event of a national security, the power goes out, the grid goes down, you need to have power remotely. So we're building bases there to do that. So it's a very exciting field. The system we did here for John was one originally. I know John wanted to do on this barn here. I didn't want to put solar panels up here, and the township here is very difficult with solar, unfortunately. And the biggest challenge we have is getting some uniform codes, throughout the state or throughout the country for solar. I could go in one town and they have open arms about solar. I go in another town, it's a lot of restrictions. So part of the thing we're trying to do is make it more uniform so we can deal with that. But the system here that we designed is a ground-based system. It's provides electricity for about 80–90% of the farm today, and it's, as John mentioned, it's guaranteed for 25 years, but probably lasts 50 years. There's no real moving parts to it. It's all clean energy. And the nice thing about renewable energy and about the payback analysis is that it's renewable. And a lot of people don't understand what that means. Is that once we install a solar system, all the energy is coming from the sun. So once you pay for it, and the typical system comes back maybe 3 or 4 years you pay for it, then you have lifetime free energy. And it's really hard to put a value on that because you have lifetime free energy and it's uninterruptible. It's all coming from the sun. So it's been a great thing. But maybe we take a walk outside and we'll check it out.
Let me just ask you one question.
Sure.
And John, any excess energy that you produce can be sold back to the grid, correct?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that is a key to it. I mean, if we lost that, it would make it so much harder to get the kind of expansion we have. We have already in Bucks County, what, 1,200 installations?
1,200 installations, and what's happening, I'm glad you brought that up, John, because a whole new field that we're getting involved in is energy storage. And I started another company called Fortress Power, where we get lithium batteries. So now, if John's here during the summer months and he's generating power and using the house, but maybe in months September, October, he may not be here, any excess energy is going back to the grid and it's being used by his neighbors. And that can happen throughout the day too, where maybe in the morning, the sun comes out, John's not here, or his family's not here, all that power goes back to the grid used by your neighbors, then at nighttime you get that power back, it's all net metering. We also have things where the utilities now, because the grid is so comprehensive, there's a lot of mismatch between when the utilities have the power and when people want to consume the power, and that's happening in California. So in the daytime in California, you may pay 25 cents a kilowatt hour for power, but at nighttime it may be only 10 cents. So what we do is we have energy storage systems, so you generate the power with your solar system during the daytime, and it's stored, then you use it at nighttime, and vice versa. So it's a way of allocating costs and saving costs, and also we're doing things in Vermont now, where in other states are starting to do it, where the grid will actually will install battery systems for a number of households and businesses, and then when the grid gets taxed because there's too much power on it, the utility has the right to reach into people's homes and actually grab the energy from the battery system and compensate them for that, to help pay for it. And it's all bringing the whole network together, which is very efficient. So we're working with PECO on that, we're working with a lot of the utilities on that. So energy storage is the next generation of renewable energy.
And John, real quick, just not to belabor the point, but
Sure.
what we're talking about here, correct, is net metering.
Correct, net metering, yes.
Net metering. And net metering is something, I want to be really clear about this so everybody understands, it's not in every state. In fact, most states don't have it. Pennsylvania is one of the states that does have it, and it sets us apart. It's a distinctive, it's something that makes it more attractive for people to install solar on their properties, or biodigesters if you're a farm, which turns manure, frankly, into electricity. It's wonderful. Or geothermal, or wind. So net metering is a phenomenal thing. It's something we're grateful for. We'd like to see more of it, frankly, but it's a wonderful thing. So just appreciate our legislators for providing that for us.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Pat?
What if it's a rainy day for quite a few days? I mean, do you store that here, or does it store it on the grid and take it
Well,
back?
if the solar system, say it's rainy or it's overcast or nighttime,
For a while.
if the solar system's not working, so John's getting power from the grid. So he's just getting the power from the grid, and so he'll draw the power from the grid. But say another day is brightly sunshine, he may be producing more power than he really needs. So he'll send all the excess power back to the utility, and it's all, seamless to him. He doesn't realize it's happening. So the way that, the computers with the solar system work, it's going back and forth. So, but now, say for example, he had, a week or so he had a week of no power, then he could, if he had an energy storage system, he could draw upon the energy storage system. We're actually doing a lot of work in Puerto Rico now. We're sending batteries down to Puerto Rico because that grid is so decimated by the Hurricane Maria that we're sending, people have solar systems down there, but they don't have the way to store the energy. So now we're selling portable storage units where you can, it's a lithium battery about the size of this chair that can power a whole house. And we're, working with that technology with it. So it's
And
exciting.
that's a third dimension to national security, which has got some of us in the national security field deeply concerned. You may have read about some of the recent declassifications of the extent to the daily attacks, assaults on the U.S. Navy and the Pentagon and the key defense contractors from China and from Russia. And it is every day, every one of those companies and every one of those offices in the military gets attacked by cyber. And they are developed, and we were looking at watching the Russian submarine effort. People forget Russia is only 1/15 the size of the United States economy. So they're not the threat that the Soviet Union used to be, but they're using their scarce resources very smartly. They are developing and they've been testing. We know it because they do these kind of testing attacks every day through the internet as to how to shut down our entire power network. And they can do it through several dimensions, space-based, undersea cables. They can cut the entire internet. Today, they have the capability to do it. And so if we can build a more robust and integrated but decentralized power system using private homes, using arrays like this with a more robust kind of storage system that is integrated into the power companies, that makes it almost impossible if we do the proper backing up for the Russians to have that tool, which they have today, which is to shut down our entire energy. Now, it's an act of war. So this is the future. It has to be the future. And so this is like right now, net metering is seen by some as solar power people versus PECO or the other power companies. That now is becoming, we're losing that opposition, and we'd love to hear you say a word too.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. There's a couple issues that have been touched upon, and when you talk about national security.
Just introduce yourself briefly.
I'm sorry. My name's Mark Haas. I'm a Director of Legislative and Government Affairs for PECO. I function in Harrisburg, Washington, Philadelphia. But for our company, we're trying to take a advanced look at where we should be as a state with regard to solar power. When you talk about national security, we've introduced a bill in Harrisburg to allow utilities to start building microgrids, put them in front of the Public Utility Commission, and see if they work. And the idea being that it would be an integrated, independent system within a system, that in the event of a national emergency, major storm, and we've had them in the past 6 to 10 years, that you would have an area that would be sustainable and running, where people could get hospitalization, food, clothing, shelter. Electricity, it would be a 1 mile by 1 mile area. Our thoughts are to build one within each county. We are helping the former Philadelphia Naval Base build their system up. They will be its own self-contained microgrid at some point. And we're experimenting in our transportation center in Berwyn. But that being said, the legislation is facing some obstacles. We're involved in House Bill 531. The company wants to see more solar growth on its system. It's a customer demand for us. Net metering is a challenge for us. It's where it may reap benefits and promote solar growth. PECO has to serve all customers, and net metering is composed of two components: your energy credit and your delivery credit. And when you have your excess capacity, you get a full credit back on the retail, what we call the retail rate. Where that's a challenge for utilities is that we have to supply and support all customers: low income, middle class customers, upper income customers. And with more customers going solar, our concern is this: that you're having increased costs on the grid from a shrinking class of customers. Yet we still have to maintain the grid for everyone. So who's going to be picking up the cost of the grid is the customers that can't afford to go solar or choose not to go solar. Their costs are going to go up as more people go solar. We're looking to strike a balance in that area, and working with policymakers in Harrisburg to find that balance. Often the challenges are political for the lawmakers, and you guys have some difficult challenges ahead in that area. I do believe we are going to get a broader solar mandate in the state. Right now, our obligation is 0.5% of our energy purchases. Remember, PECO and the other utilities are FedEx. We deliver your electricity. We really don't care where you buy it. But it's 1.5%, and there's been some bills introduced to take it from 10% to 30%. It all comes with cost, and it depends on how much policymakers want to see customers bear that cost. 5% for us on a 500 kilowatt home, and that's the average that the Public Utility Commission uses. It's probably a row house in Philadelphia that size, uses 500 kilowatts. The increased cost of a 5% mandate would be about $2 a month on their bill. Not a lot of money in the scheme of things, but for those struggling, yeah, it is a burden. So if you go 10%, $4. We were advocating that nuclear legislation. That was a 2% increase on people's bills. We got a large pushback on that number. But we're in a position where we're trying to advance solar, PECO. We have a lot of customer demand to do more on our system. There was a good bill passed last year with the help of some of the folks in the room. It allowed us to go with alternative rate making and make proposals to the commission to be able to balance out those costs from a grid system to all the customers in a either performance manner, where we'd be judging our rate increase on a performance basis, or alternative rate making, which would put demand-based rates on self-generators. So there are some answers out there, but there's some big challenges too. But it's the type of thing we're trying to be as customer responsive as we can. We created a new unit 2 years ago to help folks like yourself get, and it was something I think we hired 12 new people to have a solar unit within our company. The demand is very strong right now for solar. So we're trying to accommodate our customers' requests, but also balance those costs out that it doesn't impact our low-income customers whom we have to serve too adversely. So.
Well, what
Can I just ask a quick question? I hate to put you on the spot, but it's relative to something that you both said. Is when you are generating, are there limits to how much of your own power you can generate? Can you generate 100% of your power and retain it at infinite?
Yes.
Okay. I was under the impression that there was a minimum that you still had to purchase from the utility.
No, not really.
Okay.
No, you can generate your entire supply.
Mhm.
We, at this point have to buy your excess. So if you use 1,000 kilowatts and you're generating 1,200, we got to buy the 200 from you. And we're fine with the purchase of the power. For us, the issue is the retail rate combines our cost of delivery. So you get to use our system for free, and
I remember you and I
that's
discussed
the public
that.
policy
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
Yeah, probably almost like, the way it works now is with solar, any excess power you generate through net metering, the grid, or PICO in this case, will be your, in essence, your virtual battery. So you generate excess power, you give it back to the grid, and the grid is passing on to other people. Where it's moving now is that people have their own battery systems. So as opposed to passing on to a virtual battery, you're passing on to a battery that's on your site. So you maintain and control that way. So we're selling, like in Puerto Rico, we're selling batteries to people, and they're off the grid completely. So they're completely independent from that. The other thing I'll mention too is we're working with a major mass transit provider, where John's earlier point is that people are concerned about, cybersecurity, things like that, where, somebody could shut down a transit authority, or shut down something like that, or shut down a major part of PICO. There's a lot of critical switches and gears and lights and antennas, things like that. We're providing remote power to all these locations on all these various train tracks. So we're in a program now, there's like 200 sites. We have critical switches, so if the power goes out, you can't have, that switch not turn if a train comes. So we're providing a remote station to be there, and it's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to do that. And it's remote, it's off the grid completely.
Are those batteries at the point now where they could begin to replace the whole house generators that so many people are obtaining in light of the storms that we saw?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, we sold generators prior to Hurricane Sandy, then Hurricane Sandy happened, and I probably sold 200 generators overnight. And the lithium batteries are the way of the future. The generators we sold were Kohler generators, but they're mechanical things, they're engines, they have a lot of problems and issues with them, plus they require fuel. We're having an energy storage system like a battery. It's quiet, you have it inside your house, and it provides unlimited, because the way it works, the sun comes out after a storm, and then you generate energy. You can use your solar system during the day when the sun's out. At nighttime, you just go back to the battery. It's a continuous cycle. So it's just completely, so it gives you great independence. That's why you'll see energy storage is really taking off, both on a residential basis and also commercial basis. The grid, the utilities are recognizing that, saying, listen, we have this huge energy storage in the field, let's tap upon that when we need it to balance out the grid's needs.
Go ahead, Ed.
So in 10 or 15 years, these batteries, what we have now will look juvenile. The potential is,
Yes.
or is it really that, you don't know, I guess, but
Yes, well, the technology in batteries has changed drastically now. We have, Tesla has batteries, they have a lithium ion phosphate. We have lithium, there's a lithium ion phosphate, which is a very safe battery, which, from a chemical standpoint, is low risk of, from a hazard standpoint. And those are the things where you can literally get a battery about this size that you can put out a house. It's crazy, and that's what the technology is coming to now. There's no moving parts to it. It's guaranteed for 10 years, things like that, so.
So,
Yeah, and the leading company, ironically, is here in Pennsylvania, Enersys.
Yeah.
They've got 180 engineers working on energy storage.
Yeah.
They're way ahead of anybody else.
Sure. Well, it's a small little company based in Bucks County called Fortress Power.
there's no free lunch in life.
No free lunch, John, huh?
listen, Barry's going to tell us a little bit more about the solar field out there. And again, are we going to launch the drone?
No.
We'll do it later.
Later on,
Okay, so you won't feel like you're being under attack. Feel free to ask Barry, John, Mark, the legislators that are here. And why don't you two just introduce yourself real quickly if you would, Todd?